Bam.
My name is Nick Bryant, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
The Epstein Files are one of the craziest stories of the last 25 years, I would imagine. All of the intrigue around it. It's maybe this generation's JFK. How am I doing? Do you agree with that?
Yes, there's certain parallels between JFK and Epstein. However, we have, I think, much more definitive information with regards to Epstein than we have with JFK.
Okay. Go on.
Well, with Epstein, we know who a lot of the perpetrators are.
Yeah.
With Epstein, we know who a lot of the procurers are. And there's 1,200, according to the government, there's 1,200 victims out there that could testify against them. So we have the goods to impanel a grand jury and start getting indictments. There was 4 women, Adriana Ross, Nadia Marcinkova, Sarah Kellen, and Leslie Groff, who were procurers for Epstein. And they knew all about the machine that he and Maxwell created. They could be indicted next week. We could impanel a grand jury, indict those 4 women next week. Although Marcinkova is kind of missing in action, we know where the other 3 live.
Yeah.
And we could indict them on multiple counts of child trafficking, which in the federal system is 15 to life. And then they would start rolling over on the perps. Actually, with the latest Epstein document dump, Sarah Kellen had a lawyer and she was looking to make a deal with the feds.
Yeah. Crazy. All these people that have shook their fists. I'm in a position of power. I demand, right? And the last administration did fuck all. And this administration has done something. I guess there's a dump today of another 3,000 pages, if we're supposed to believe that. And why not? Why not believe it? But why are we so hemmed up? How have all of these people that swore they were going to, and a lot of them ran on this, that they were going to get this dealt with? Why are we still not dealing with simple things like grand juries?
Let's go back to the Bush 1 administration. Well, actually,
Okay.
Maria Farmer notified the FBI about Epstein in 1996, and nothing was done.
Mm.
And then the Palm Beach Police Department started an investigation against Epstein in 2005, 2006, and they were ready to indict Epstein on 5 counts, different counts of abuse of minors.
Okay.
And that case got taken away from them by the feds. And what's really interesting about the feds is they had done an extensive investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. And they had had a grand jury, and they were ready to indict Jeffrey Epstein on 60 counts, criminal counts.
Right.
And one of them was child trafficking. But then all of a sudden, Alexander Acosta, the U.S. attorney, makes this sweetheart deal with Jeffrey Epstein. He has the state sentence Jeffrey Epstein to 18 months in a county jail. He serves 13, but he gets to go out during the day. And then the feds give blanket immunity to all of his co-conspirators, which includes the procurers and the perps. Now, that was done in 2007 under the Bush 2 administration.
Okay.
And think about this. Although when Alexander Acosta was being vetted by the Trump administration for labor secretary, he was asked why he went so light on Epstein. And he said, I was told that Epstein was intelligence and it was above my pay grade. I had to back off. So that's what he told the Trump administration. He's since recanted all of that. But now that we know that there's a 60 count indictment, and we know that count 51 was child trafficking, a U.S. attorney is going to cover that up unilaterally. I mean, a U.S. attorney is not going to cover up a nationwide or international child trafficking network unilaterally. he's going to have to get the thumbs up from his boss. Now, there's only two people that can tell a U.S. attorney to stand down. One is the attorney general and one is the president.
Right.
And at that time, the attorney general was Alberto Gonzales. And Alberto Gonzales isn't going to go out on a limb and cover up a nationwide or international child trafficking network without his boss telling him. So this went all the way up to Bush, too. I believe that the progenitor of the Epstein cover-up in 2007, 2008 was George Bush, too. And then that they build the Pandora's box. And Obama doesn't want to mess with Pandora's box. Biden doesn't want to mess with Pandora's box. Actually, Trump didn't want to mess with Pandora's box during his first term. But during his second term, he said that he would be for transparency in the Epstein case. And he cracked Pandora's box open ever so slightly. And regardless of how wide you crack Pandora's box open, you're going to end up with the curse coming out. And the curse came out. So the toothpaste is out of the tube, and the Trump administration did its best to put it back by disavowing Jeffrey Epstein's child trafficking network, and also by putting pressure on federal legislators not to vote for the discharge petition. But he realized at a certain point, or his administration realized at a certain point, that this thing was a juggernaut and it had a lot of people behind it. And so the Republicans just caved in and voted almost unanimously. There was one person in the House that voted against it, which is kind of strange. But then all the Senate everyone in the Senate voted for it. And I believe that the Trump administration felt that it could withhold documents and redact documents, so there would be minimal damage. And what is Trump protecting? I've heard it said that he's protecting his friends, and that's true. I've heard it said that he's protecting himself, and that could be true. But I definitely believe that he's protecting a system that's rife with honey traps and blackmail. That's one of the things that he's protecting.
You know, you may or may not realize this, but I'm a counterintelligence agent by trade. That's what I used to do in the Army. Pretty good one. And I would say that, we often think we will withstand the honey trap. But if pussy walks in the door asking to be dealt with, is really tough to say no to it, especially if there's a design in it and the person's on a mission. Everybody thinks that they can crack an FBI interrogation. But the reality is those guys are really good at what they do. They're professionals, right? And so when these kind of things wander in, yeah, it's tough. And then the other thing I would say is if I was adversarial towards the United States, I'm from another nation, and I'm the Pete who is in another nation and doing things, I for sure target DC because there's zero accountability. And this is not a political statement, but I just saw President Clinton and Secretary Clinton wave off a congressional subpoena. So if there is no accountability, well, bing, my ears perk up, and I'm thinking, wow, yeah, who can I get my claws into? Just insidious, be their best friend, not do anything bad, but just walk my way into a black book full of people who've been honey trapped and are exploitable. That's all I need. I just need to find people who are exploitable. And because DC is full of power and people that are desperate to hold on to it, and desperate to make that money, there's a lot of exploitable people there. I mean, everything that I know how to do professionally ties into that very belief. I just need to find people who are exploitable, who have access to where I want to get to. And then I just slowly work. And whatever country I work for will give me all the money in the world to dig my hooks into DC.
Nothing makes people stupid like sex, money, and power. Yeah. Sex, money, and power can reduce the smartest people to babbling idiots. And we've seen that time and time again.
One time. One crack, one mistake, one night we had a little bit too much. One night we were like, I will do the MDMA. And then, you're like, and it's against your character. That's all it takes. One bit of weakness and the exploitability crack opens. And then a guy like me can stick his arm in, make a fist, and then pull you with him.
I've written 3 books on political blackmail and by the CIA. And the first book I wrote about it was called The Franklin Scandal, a story of power brokers, child abuse, and betrayal. And it was about a nationwide pedophile network that, Epstein is almost a carbon copy of the Franklin network. And if you weren't compromised, there was a house in Washington, D.C. that all the big shots attended parties there. It was owned by a CIA asset named Craig Spence. And like Epstein's homes, it was wired through audiovisual blackmail. And how these parties went down, they would start out like as straight political cocktail parties. And then at a certain point, maybe 10 or 11, at a certain point, after people have been plied with a lot of alcohol, or as much alcohol as they wanted to drink, then something inappropriate would happen. Somebody would fire up a joint, break out a line of coke, or something sexually inappropriate would go down. And the people that were appalled by that would split, but the guys and gals who were serious customers, and mostly guys, they would stick around and they would be compromised. It's not rocket science.
Yeah. When we talk about these things, they often get couched as the Russian asset, the Chinese asset, or the Israeli asset. Guess what, everybody? Every nation on the planet has intel agents that are trying to gain purchase. And if you wanted to pick one country in the world to target, I'll give you one guess as to what country you would come target. So we tend to look at these things like through a very narrow lens. And I'm not saying anybody is an asset, because that's like the oldest trope in the world. But this DC is the place you would go. I can't think of a better city on the planet to go to if you had a couple $1 million to blow and you had a guy you trusted to go on the ground. I'd send him to DC.
Compromising certain types is very easy. I'll give you an example. Larry Craig was a very conservative senator. He was from Idaho, family values guy. And actually, I think he had like the worst record in the Senate against voting for gay rights. And I wrote a book called Compromised: The Politics of Sex, Lies, and Blackmail. And it was from the perspective of Henry Vincent, who ran the largest gay escort service that's ever been exposed in Washington, D.C. And CIA assets used his escorts to compromise closeted politicians. And with Craig was a frequent flyer at Henry Vincent's escort service. And he was getting escorts from other services too. And ultimately, he was busted in a bathroom at the Twin Cities airport trying to pick up a Vice Squad cop. And there's a signaling that goes down in men's bathrooms where someone slaps their foot on the ground a number of times, and then if the person in the stall next to him is ready to roll, then they get together. And I'm from Minneapolis, and I was sitting on a commode in the airport bathroom, and there was a guy that was slapping his foot on the ground, and I thought to myself, I thought he had a neurological disorder, and I'm just glad I didn't say, could I help you?
Oops. Yeah. That's crazy. Go ahead.
I've just delineated the process of how easy it is to compromise people.
Right.
But once you're compromised, life is a completely different ballgame.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like you're on a yacht, and it's a beautiful yacht, and it's a beautiful day, and you can have anything you want on this yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown.
Yeah.
So that's how it works. No one's going to get off the yacht. And actually, you're going to experience upward mobility. Dennis Hastert was a pedophile and Speaker of the House for 7 years. And he was compromised. I mean, the FBI even knew about his shadow side when he was Speaker of the House. And being compromised really worked for him. I mean, he made it to the Speaker of the House, the third most powerful man in the country, constitutionally anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. It's your and the insidious nature of these ops is once you have one in there, boy, oh boy, you really can have some influence. And everybody in DC promotes up within DC, right? Like you rise to the ranks. And so your person who was a staffer becomes a chief of staff, and then they become a higher level, So that's sort of the nature of these things. You start out with a person who's got a smaller job and access, and those people are exploitable, not necessarily for sex, but they definitely need money and influence and power. And if you can trade those things with them, which you can, if you're doing your job on the spy side, for sure. So when we see all this stuff, it all makes sense that this is tied into not just DC, but the national power structure on the private side as well has to be in play, because again, this stuff just creeps. I'll keep saying the word insidious, but that's exactly what it is.
There was a Tennessee, he's a sitting congressman from Tennessee. His name is Tim Burchett. And a couple of years ago, he came out publicly and said, my colleagues are being compromised in honey traps, which I thought was kind of amazing. I mean, I've known about honey traps for many, many years, but to have a sitting U.S. congressman disclose that, I thought was pretty stunning.
Yeah. I'm going to put a link in here for anybody who wants to have a little fun. There's a site called theyrule.net. This is not conspiratorial. It's just a list of all of the people who are tied to all of the companies. Type in Caterpillar, for example, and then you'll see an explosion of who's on the board. And then you do 2 or 3 companies, McDonald's, whoever it is. I'm making up the companies you might try. And all of a sudden, you'll find congressional members, all kinds of people, and they all tie together really fast. It's a very small network when you break into it. And again, breaking in, that's exploitable. To get into this network, you're made for life in terms of money, right? But also, you're connected to all these people, and you need to go to these parties. Wherever the party is, you need to be at these things to be relevant, because that's where a lot of things are happening, to include the ensnaring of you into the trap.
And there are a lot of people that would sell their grandmother for power too. You always have those. So between people that are just power hungry and willing to do anything for power and compromised, I think that represents probably a significant segment of our federal legislators.
Yeah. All right. So we going back to the Epstein files. If there is this 3,000-page drop, which we should believe that there will be, are we going to learn anything explosive, or is this going to be just more noise in this whole debacle?
I would say that there might be some useful information. I found some useful information in the last drop. And I mean, you really had to be in tune with the Epstein investigation to find what I found.
Mm. Yeah.
But what has been kept from us, and I started investigating Jeffrey Epstein in 2012, and I got his black book in 2012, and I tried to get a platform or a publication to publish it, and I finally did. Gawker finally published it in 2015. And at that point, I had flight logs too, so I had a lot of information. Let me walk back to how this got going with Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi said, I've got the Epstein files on my desk, and we're going to give them, they're going to be flung to the far corners of the universe. And then we had, talking about tobacco, we had the influencers with the white notebooks that came out of the White House with their Epstein files. So then those Epstein files were released, and they were a joke. When I published the black book, I redacted the numbers of the people in the black book, and with people who I thought were victims, I redacted their last name and also their number. But in the version of the Black Book that I had, that Bondi released, she redacted everything, or the Department of Justice redacted everything. And at that point, I just knew it was that it was going to be a joke. And then there's all this pushback because actually people are don't like to see children get molested with impunity and don't think that the government should cover up child trafficking, which is two very reasonable things to believe, although our government doesn't seem to be in sync with that. But then on July 5th of 2025, last July, the FBI and Department of Justice released a document that was absurd, and no one signed it. It had the imprimaturs of the FBI and it had the imprimatur of the DOJ, but no one signed it. And it said that there were 300 gigabytes impounded from Jeffrey Epstein's homes or safes or whatever. I agree with that. And then it said that there were over 1,000 victims, and Jeffrey Epstein trafficked girls for a very long time. So I believe in that. But Pam Bondi had said that they had child abuse material, which was formerly known as child pornography. They had child abuse material that had Epstein and little girls. But in their proclamation on July 5th, they said that all that child abuse material was downloaded from the internet. And they also said, and I'm talking about the FBI and Department of Justice, that Epstein and Maxwell acted alone and there was no blackmail involved. I mean, and the fact that the Department of Justice and FBI are going to try to tell us that Epstein acted alone. We know who all these perps are, and we know who all the procurers are. I mean, the New York Times ran a big article on 5 of the procurers, so we know who they are, and that was very troubling to me because it was so disingenuous and in your face. You know, we are talking about a very, very heinous crime, child molestation.
Yeah.
So for the government to run us around like that is pretty egregious.
You know, the last 4 presidencies, to my knowledge, have all hyped that they were the most transparent administration ever. But we, continue to obscure things, right? And so do we give them the benefit of the doubt that releasing all this stuff in one fell swoop would harm innocent people, but also completely explode the capability and credibility of the United States? Would this be so caustic to us that the answer would be worse than the actual obscuring of things?
Well, I think that our system is very compromised, and Americans think that it's money from special interests and other things, and it is. I mean, that definitely plays a role in our system being compromised. But then there's this darker side of our system being compromised, and I think that our political. I've written 3 books on it, so I think that our political system is fairly rife with blackmail, and Americans. There's a couple of things about Americans. We've been socialized to think that we cannot affect change. And we've also been divided and conquered. People on the left think people on the right are insane, and people on the right think people on the left are insane. And people don't understand that if you're a Republican and you hate Democrats, if you're a Democrat and you hate Republicans, you're playing the game that our leaders and our media want you to play. And I'm kind of shocked that more people don't see that, because the polarization is so wide at this point that I would think that more people could see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And people who are paying attention right now may have noticed you've not revealed your political lean at all in this, right? Because you're more worried about these are heinous crimes. Let's stick right in there.
And I, to tell you the truth, I haven't voted for a Democrat or Republican for a very long time. I started researching our the compromise, the compromat in our government in 2002, 2003. And once I realized that our system was so polluted with compromat, I just haven't been able to vote for a Democrat or Republican. My
Yeah.
political beliefs, some of them would be considered progressive and some of them would be considered conservative.
Same.
I'm not
That's all
about,
of us, right?
yeah, I mean, I'm not about, this is transcends Republicans and Democrats. This
Right.
is America doing the right thing. And when you've got a government that covers up child sexual trafficking, that is a very diseased government and a very pathological government. And when you tackle a pathology, you got to have awareness, you got to have acceptance, and you've got action. And when I started my journey on this, I no one had any awareness. I mean, I live in New York City, the mecca of publishing. No one in New York wanted to touch an article or a book on the Franklin scandal, and that was very tough for me. And I ultimately spent 7 years on that book, and I got. I've had there was a small press on the West Coast that published it, but at that point we just couldn't get anybody to buy it because people just didn't want to believe that the government would take part in covering up child trafficking. And if you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting that crime. So people just didn't want to believe that the government would aid and abet child trafficking. But now we have the awareness, and I think we're moving towards acceptance, and then at a certain point we can move towards action. And I started a 501c3 called Epstein Justice, which I strongly urge your audience to check out. And we've got a plan to actually seek justice in the Epstein case, whereas I really don't see our government with a plan to seek justice.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the link, everybody, for that website. If you guys take a second. And also, I've been putting up links, so they'll be in the remarks, at least on YouTube, probably on Facebook as well, where you can go and you can click on these things. I will note that when I tried to put the book up for the Franklin thing, these links link to, like, they give me a little bit of money if someone buys the book. So I use these links, right? So the incentive is Pete, draw people to Amazon. If you type in the Franklin thing and you have one of these affiliate link things, you're not going to get a link for that Franklin book. That's how much this book is banned. Now, look, I'm sure Amazon has its own justification for it. They probably are saying it's not legitimate or something like that. That's my guess. But the thing
Actually, there's 540 reviews for it on Amazon.
Yeah. I'm not validating what they're saying. I understand, like, they'll say something like that, but yeah, that book is hidden a little bit. And I tried to search for it, and like always, it's like these things are deranked, right? And so there is an obscuring that does go on with all of these things. And we're free to read whatever book we want to read. And in this case, this one is pushed back. And you're right, 600, I'm rounding, 600 reviews. Wow, right? And that is illustrative of something. It certainly isn't illustrative of openness and the denial of publication. Yeah, I mean, that to me is not a good sign.
What I find to be fascinating is when we published the Franklin scandal, we couldn't get anybody to touch it.
Yeah.
And and this was in 2009, 2010, and I was going on podcasts. Podcasts are much more sophisticated now. But I was going on podcasts and people were asking me about shape-shifting reptilians and the Illuminati, and I would tell them that that's not really part of the Franklin scandal.
Right.
It's about the government covering up child trafficking. And that was, and at a certain point, I just stopped doing podcasts because I was starting to get annoyed. But now I've done a lot of podcasts, and And people are realizing with Epstein that what I was saying in the Franklin scandal is true. So now the Franklin scandal is selling more copies now than it's ever sold, which is great.
Yeah. 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 Oh my gosh. This is does when you look around at this scandal, does it lean a particular way? Because the machine will say, look at why Donald Trump's obscuring. Well, why didn't the last administration put it out? Right. Like that's a fair question. And so does it have a lean politically? Was Epstein targeting anybody in particular?
Well, Epstein was mostly targeting Democrats with little girls. But in the Franklin network, those pimps were trafficking Republicans with little boys. So that seems to be our partisan divide in in our Congress. And
Yeah.
and I think I'm kind of a lightning rod for this type of thing. And people reach out to me all the time, talking to me about this network and that network. And unfortunately, I'm just one guy. I mean, I can't really investigate. I I can, there's a few things I can investigate, but I cannot investigate everything that people want me to investigate. I can't do it. I'm just one guy. And now I'm pouring most of my energies into Epstein justice. So
Mm,
that detracts from my ability to really investigate anything other than Epstein.
right. Yeah, this is a lot of work, right, to do this. This is not something I would imagine that you can just simply gin up with AI, you know? It's just something, a thing you're just gonna have to be meticulous. How has your, um how has your work aged? You know, like, because let me back up and say this. So if I get to a new area and I'm working with the military unit and I'm gonna go do some counterintelligence stuff, I'll talk to the intel office, the two shop, and I'll say, what do you think the resolution is of your intel picture of the battle space? And if they say anything more than about 60%, I I downgrade their credibility because it's just so hard to know. And I'm talking in these cases, I'm not putting you on this, but as we stay in a job longer, as we stay in an area, we get more and more knowledge about the area, and you start to understand things. So how has your resolution evolved in this case as you've gotten deeper and had the context to understand a simple page from 3000 and how it's relevant to something else? That because they're not putting this in a book that's like sequenced, right? It's like here's a bunch of documents.
Well, as I said earlier, I started investigating Jeffrey Epstein in 2012, pretty much
Yeah.
before anybody in the media was investigating him. And I realized that he was running. I called up some of the victims, and they told me about being flown to different places, being flown to an island, and then I
Mhm.
got the flight logs that corroborated that. So I knew what Jeffrey Epstein was all about in 2012, and it was just a matter of me trying to get the word out. And because of the Franklin scandal, I knew that these type of networks existed. And as I said earlier, I'm very, very happy that Epstein has gone this far and that Americans, the vast majority of Americans, know about Jeffrey Epstein and that the government aided and abetted his, uh, his heinous crimes. Because just that in itself is
What action should we be taking? What should we be doing?
Issues.com and webinars. You can put your name. We this number a month where how people can come put pressure. People have been social, definitely.
Right here below me, and they have a commitment, Epstein, Eric Swalwell, and here is someone that's a honeypot. This is a debate, not a political fact. And so you're a guy like that, right? And you're not going to get to have some insane and want to like into trouble. Is it possible that this 3% problem, too many things where they jump off the fake dare platform?
As we gain momentum and more legislators come on board, then we're going to be able to focus on specific legislators. And they're going to have to provide us with answers on why they don't believe. And what we're shooting for at Epstein Justice is an independent congressional commission.
Okay.
And independent congressional commissions are very unique. They do not require a signature from the president. We just need a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate. And independent congressional commissions often employ non-government employees, non-government and personnel. And that's what we would need. Is we don't want an Epstein subcommittee because things die when they go to subcommittees. We want an independent congressional investigation, and we're just going to have to put pressure on our federal legislators to make that happen.
Do they want to make it happen? I mean, is this? Someone was saying earlier, like later on, that they had higher priority things. I can't remember who the congressional member was, but it was someone who's pretty boisterous about this, and then backed off and said, "We've just got other things to worry about," and for whatever reason, started waving off the whole Epstein thing.
Well, that's up to us as Americans. I mean, do we want to put pressure on our legislators or not? I mean, we're providing a vehicle to do that, and it's really up to Americans at that point. Do you want a government that aids and abets child trafficking? I mean, you've got to ask yourself that as an American. Do I want a government that aids and abets child trafficking? You know, if you're cool with that, then, you know, you don't want anything to do with Epstein Justice. But if you're not cool with that, we're offering a way that you can empower yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So let's ask some of the obvious questions. Do you think Epstein killed himself?
I've been fairly agnostic about that, but the footage that Dan Bongino showed us was pretty bogus.
Okay.
And, I mean, the Department of Corrections took a lot of heat for allowing Epstein to kill himself. And it's very hard to kill yourself in that particular prison. And the footage that Dan Bongino showed, you could easily skirt and stay on the right side next to the railing without being seen by that particular camera.
Right.
But one of the things that I've often said is people get bogged down in, did he kill himself? Did he not kill himself? I try to direct the conversation towards, let's do something about it. Let's do something about his child trafficking, because we can go around and around and around about whether Epstein killed himself. There's a lot of evidence that he did. There's evidence that he didn't. So for me, I'm focused on actually making sure that the perpetrators, the independent congressional commission that we basically want two things. We want to know why the government covered up child trafficking, and we want the perpetrators to be prosecuted. Very baseline moral thing. Yeah. So that's what we want. And we're not, as far as morality goes, I don't think we're asking for very much.
The 3 trillion gigabytes, whatever that number was, of all that information that was on a computer.
300 gigabytes, yeah.
300 gigabytes. How do we how do we parse that? I mean, you don't want to, if it's got child pornography on it, you don't want to just put it on the web and say, here is the .gov, because now the US government is now, pushing child pornography. So how do we get you access to that in a way that's not going to be worse than just simply putting it out there?
I do not know if there's a way
Okay.
to put it out there. But, and this is another absurdity by the Trump administration. In 2025, Pam Bondi said that they're going through all the footage and they're discovering this and they're discovering that. As I said earlier, she contradicted. She said that Epstein was involved in the child abuse material, and then the government did an about face and said it was all downloaded. But Epstein's New York safe was opened shortly after he was arrested. And that's when the hard drives and discs were taken out. And his safe was more like a closet. It wasn't your traditional little safe. And the FBI and who knows what other alphabet agencies, they were going through that stuff that day. I mean, and I'm sure that people did triple time to make sure what Epstein had. And was it deleterious or not to the government? So for Bondi to say that the Department of Justice is just going through that now, 6 years after it's been impounded, is really an egregious lie. That it's like all of that was impounded and it just sat in a corner of the FBI or Department of Justice collecting dust and cobwebs and no one bothered to look at it. That is utter bullshit.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's, I mean, when you think about these elements of like what you would do in an investigation, anybody watching, like if you have an investigation, you have timelines. You have to meet. Some of them are legal, some of them are driven by your boss. To have something of that magnitude sitting there untouched, it takes a lot of influence to turn that off. I mean, you're making a career. If you start arresting people and putting people in jail on that, you are making a career. So think about that. They're turning, that's how much power it takes to turn this off. You have people that are desperate to do their job. There's a lot of great people in our law enforcement who are trying to do this very thing. It's a defining element. So who's to be trusted? I mean, that's the big question here, Nick, is who do we trust? And if it's not the person we just elected who ran on this, okay, vote him out. I'm all for hashtag vote out incumbents, right? I'm all for that. Get out, give someone else a shot. But who's to be trusted?
Legislators that vote for an independent congressional commission, like we're proposing.
Yeah.
They're to be trusted. We've got both Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna have endorsed what we're doing. And we need to collect more federal legislators. And we can get to a point where we have a number of federal legislators that are willing to help or facilitate Epstein justice in the independent congressional commission. And then there's going to be some recalcitrant ones. And we're going to have to hit the recalcitrant ones very, very hard on why they would cover up an investigation into child sex trafficking.
Yeah. If you could change one thing for the next year, if you get a meeting with the boss, you're sitting in front of Donald Trump, what are you going to ask him for? I mean, the committee thing, okay, great. But like, this is Donald Trump. So what are you going to ask for?
I would ask him to support an independent congressional commission.
Okay. But so that's the heart and soul of this whole thing, is this commission.
Yeah.
Could we trust him to populate it? Or
I at this point, the way that the Trump administration has been very, very difficult about allowing people to see what the documents that have been pounded, I do not trust the Trump administration.
Okay.
At this point. With this issue, I do not trust the Trump administration.
Right. Okay, well, when does it stop? If it's not this issue, when does your trust begin? Or what else is included in that I don't trust on this issue thing? Like, do we trust them on the Butler shooting? Do we trust them on? Where do you Where do you
To tell you
begin?
the truth, I'm willing to talk to people about Epstein, but I'm not really willing to. I spend so much time working on Epstein that I really can't pursue other political things that come up. And I'm pretty uninformed on. I've got friends that follow the news and Twitter, and they're very up to date on things that are happening and going down. I see what they send me, but I don't have enough time to
Sure.
check it out. I just
Yeah.
don't have enough time.
We're going to run out of time here, and there's obviously a lot more to talk about. But what should we have gotten into? What have I missed that you're like, man? I wish we would have talked about.
No, I think we pretty much summed it all up.
Yeah. What's the best way to support you? How do we take care of Nick?
Well, you can go to EpsteinJustice.com and give us a donation. We are not getting rich off EpsteinJustice.com. Actually, last year I pulled $1,500 from EpsteinJustice.com. So,
Yeah.
but if people want to support us, because we do need, I mean, we have an accountant. There's things that we want to do. I mean, everything requires money. I mean, people say, well, why do you need money? And they're part of some professional society. I said, well, why do you need money for that?
Yeah.
I mean, our accountant is, if you have a nonprofit, an accountant's very important. And if I went to my accountant, well, why do you need money? I mean, it's all rather silly.
Yeah.
When people bring up the fact that we're one of those, but I understand that, because there are a lot of organizations that are anti-trafficking, anti-exploitation that aren't doing a lot. They're very good at fundraising, but they don't seem to be doing much.
Well, in the corruption level in nonprofits, charities, et cetera, all those things is higher than anybody's comfortable with. We've learned to not trust these organizations. No critique on you, but we've seen so many stories, and then again, we don't see the culpability. And maybe the culpability happens, they don't talk about it because it's not quote unquote newsworthy. But right now I'm hearing a lot of chatter about what's going on in Minnesota with the Somalis, and who are there and what they're doing. And I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for people to go to jail, if it even happened. I struggle with, Nick, the gate between politics and policy, right? Like where, this has nothing to do with actual legislation. This has everything to do with party or protection of power.
In the early 2000s, we saw the Bush administration lie about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Sure. And actually, you could tell in real time almost that they were lying. And but we went to war and spent billions of dollars. And actually, Afghanistan is still run by the Taliban, and Iraq is a mess. No heads rolled whatsoever. You saw the banks completely destroy our economic system, and millions of people lost everything, including their homes.
Yeah.
And no heads rolled.
Yeah.
With COVID, I believe it came out of that Wuhan lab.
Of course.
And I believe, and that Wuhan lab was being funded by the Centers for Disease Control and USAID. So why haven't any heads rolled there either? This is different. This is about American children getting molested with impunity. This is about the government aiding and abetting child trafficking. It's very different. And I think that according to the CDC, 25% of underage girls have been molested and 5% of underage boys. And people in the field think it's slightly conservative for underage girls and very conservative for underage boys. But if you just go with those numbers, you've got over 50 million Americans that have been molested as minors. That's why this is important. If we let all these perps walk, which is what our government wants to do, we're essentially telling millions of Americans that have been molested as minors is you have no hope and you have no hope for justice. And that is a message that we also have to make sure that we don't, as our government doesn't, propagate that. That's the word I was looking for, propagate that message.
Fair enough. Well, listen, everybody, this is Nick Bryant. You can definitely go check him out. We're going to direct you straight over to the Epstein Justice page. But if you want, you can also go over to his own homepage. That's easy to do. It's just Nick, and I'll put the link up here again for that. But this is how you deal with these things is by supporting the guys who are in the trenches. You know, it's a lot of work to make these things work. So any final words before we go?
Not really. Just check out Epstein Justice and join us as we march for justice. Our political system is a sewer. And if we want to clean up, we can clean out that sewer. It's up to us, really. I mean, if we want to be apathetic, then everything that happens to us, that the government does to us, we essentially, I think, deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Nick Bryant, go check him out. I'll talk to you all in a little bit. Another show today. So we'll see you all in a little bit. Thank you very much, Nick, for coming on. I'll say goodbye to you in a second. Everybody else, I'll see you all.